This is the medical breakthrough of stem cells by Ariel and Miguel. So before I get into stem cells, let's talk about a few things that stem cell research has done for us. One, it has given us the power to understand how diseases take place. They also help us test new medical treatments before even attempting them on humans, and regenerate and repair damaged or diseased tissues. So the term stem cell has actually been a part of the scientific vernacular since the mid 1800s, but it wasn't until the late 1900s that we actually saw movement within stem cell research. And this was largely due to the lack of government funds that stem cell research was receiving, mainly with embryonic stem cell research because of some ethical issues that it was facing. So again, it was late until the 1900s, a little bit into the 2000s, that actual movement and research began with this. But still, stem cells are said to be one of the greatest discoveries for potential treatments and many diseases. So, what are stem cells? Stem cells are unspecialized cells that have the ability to proliferate and differentiate into specific cell types, meaning that they have the ability to self-renew and the potential to divide and develop into specialized cells. When a stem cell undergoes proliferation and differentiation, the stem cell will divide into two daughter cells. One daughter cell will remain a stem cell and will self-renew and prepare for further cell divisions, while the other one develops into cells with specific functions and characteristics in a process called differentiation. This is why these cells have the potential to act as repair systems and replace damaged cells, and why stem cell therapy has come about. So what are some ways that we can categorize stem cells? Well, first, by their potency. Potency just refers to the stem cell's ability to differentiate into specific or specialized cells. Embryonic stem cells, for example, are pluripotent, meaning that they can differentiate into almost any cell type of the body. Adult stem cells are multipotent, meaning that they can only produce cells in the germ layer that it originates from. Another way that we can categorize stem cells is by where it comes from in the body. There are two main sources that stem cells are derived from in the body. One is the embryo, which produces embryonic stem cells, and the other is adult body tissues, which is where adult stem cells come from. And there are many types of adult stem cells as well. So the types of stem cells, again, embryonic stem cells are extracted from the embryo. They are found in the inner cell mass of blastocytes and usually come from in vitro fertilization procedures. These cells can't support the full development of an organism, but they can form into adult stem cells, which are tissue-specific and can replenish dead or destroyed tissue. But adult stem cells have a limited ability to become other types of cells and the limited ability to divide and multiply, unlike embryonic stem cells, which have endless abilities. The first successful transplant was actually an adult stem cell about 30 years ago. It was from the hematopoietic stem cells, or the blood stem cells, which is used in bone marrow transplant with cancer patients, and this just helps aids chemotherapy and radiation. Another type of adult stem cells are mesenchymal stem cells. It's definitely highly researched. It was in all the databases and online everywhere, but it's because it's the most accessible, and they show promise in regenerative medicine because they play a role in maintaining and repairing tissues and organs. Other types of stem cells would include epithelial stem cells, skin stem cells, neural stem cells, but another really important one is the induced pluripotent stem cells. These are pretty significant types of stem cells because they were engineered in labs. They are actually adult stem cells that have been reprogrammed to resemble and behave like embryonic stem cells, which enables them to develop into any type of human cell needed for therapy. But these stem cells are actually a pretty recent discovery and still have a lot of research to undergo, as well as stem cells and stem cell therapy in general, seeing as how our first successful transplant was only a few decades ago.
Hello, everyone. I'm Miguel, and I will be covering the advantages, disadvantages, and conclusion of our stem cell research paper. So, one of the major advantages of stem cell research is its applications to combat against certain diseases. For example, one major section of diseases are neurodegenerative diseases. And within these, one of the major ones is Alzheimer's disease. This disease is a disease that attacks neurons and degrades and basically kills them, which results in memory skills to degrade. One way stem cell research could remedy this is by replacing those neurons, which would improve the memory of patients. Another example is Parkinson's disease. This is a disease that affects particularly motor skills by degrading the neurons that produce dopamine or degrading neurotransmission in general. This eventually results in the patient shaking and eventually stiffness and inability to be able to produce any motor skills in general. This could be remedied too by stem cells replacing these particular neurons that produce the dopamine and neurotransmission, which would allow for these particular neurons to continue to work, thus combating against the loss of the neurons in the first place. Another section of diseases in which stem cells research could be applied to is autoimmune diseases. In particular, a good example would be diabetes type 1. This type of diabetes is this type of diabetes particularly attacks the the cells in the pancreas that create insulin in the first place. This this is a perfect example where stem cells could be used to replace the cells that are attacked and destroyed. For example, stem cells in specific mesenchymal stem cells, correction, embryonic stem cells. Embryonic stem cells could be used to replenish the beta cells within the pancreas, thus allowing the pancreas to be able to produce insulin once more. This would basically cure the patient of diabetes type 1 and allow them to be able to produce insulin on their own and not have to depend on insulin purchased from somewhere else, for example, like pharmacies and stuff like that. Lastly, another major advantage would be the application of replacing body organs. For example, replacing spinal injuries. Spinal injuries affect patients a lot in the sense that they're basically paralyzed and they won't be able to move. But through use of stem cells, we can replace the damaged portion of the spine, thus allowing for it to function once more and allow for movement again. Now, moving on to disadvantages. Although stem cells are a marvel of a discovery in the medical field, there is a lot of disadvantages that come along with it. For example, replication difficulties. In particular, stem cells that are replicated have a tendency to degrade relatively quickly, which means that the procedure for stem cells to even be applied into a human being would have to be quick as possible as to prevent these stem cells from degrading in general. Another danger is the dangers of stem cell rejection, or in particular, the formation of teratomas, which teratomas are basically like clumps of like formed organs. For example, they could include like clumps of teeth, hair, stuff like that. And poses a major problem because it induces a, an immune response. And this immune response could prove dangerous to the patient's health, which is one of the major reasons that stem cells aren't exactly applied as of today. And lastly, one of the major disadvantages are the ethical and political issues that surround stem cells. One good example of these issues is, in particular, embryonic stem cells. Embryonic stem cells come from preserved embryos, and this poses a large ethical issue because how are we going to be taking cells from embryos? For example, this doesn't quite sit well with pro-life people and stuff like that. And due to these ethical issues, a lot of funding for embryonic stem cell research has gone down, which was covered previously by my partner Ariel Tran. In general, these ethical issues is what greatly does not allow us to continue or further our research in stem cells because of the fact that in particular, companies that might be doing the research, they don't get the funding that they need for them to like complete actual tests and to make sure or in general like get rid of these disadvantages like stem cell rejection and difficulties in replicating. But nevertheless, although stem cell research is very controversial and has a while to go before we can apply it into actual medical cases, it is a monumental scientific discovery that should not be taken lightly and should be continued to be researched as it could result in curing diseases that could previously not be cured or had no future in being cured.